So, hi everyone, we are group 4 of Microeconomic Tutorial 11. Our team includes Tú, Bảo, Trang Ngọc, me. Today we will discuss the government intervention in pulp market, which is the main idea of an article from thechi.com. Our presentation is consisted of 4 parts. Review of the article, discussion of parties influenced, unintended consequences, and recommendation and conclusion. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us at the end of our presentation. So let's get started with the review of the article. First, we go with 3 problems. The first problem, selling price of fried pigs decreased sharply. The reality is that in March, the price is about 70,000 Vietnam dong to 75,000 Vietnam dong. And now the price has decreased to 35,000 Vietnam dong to 45,000 Vietnam dong. The reason is stated that the consumption of pulp goods decreased because of the complicated development of COVID-19 pandemic, while the supply of pulp still increases. Moreover, the supply of other substitute food is diverse, also influence the selling price of fried pigs. We move to the second problem. Price of animal feed has continuously increased. It may cause difficulties for in the population of pigs for livestock farmers, especially smallholder farmers. Moreover, it can cause shortage of pulp for Tết holiday in the next 3 months. The last problem, selling price of fried pigs decreasingly, while pulp price has not decreased correspondingly. The reality is that the pulp price is from 60,000 Vietnam dong to 130,000 Vietnam dong. The reason is that the ratio of fried pig price only accounts for 55 to 60% of rate of pulp price, and there are additional fees like a transportation, COVID-19 test, label stay the same or even increase, make the pulp price in the market become high. We go to some solutions that are released in the convention. Firstly, we go with Ministry of Finance. The ministry is required to propose financial solutions to support the livestock farmers having the remaining pigs which are not sold. The Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development is demanded to form 2 groups for connecting, transporting, boosting imported goods and commercial activities with Japan and Korea market. The ministry is also suggested to collaborate with involving businesses and the local authorities to encourage large consuming organizations to consume domestic pork products. Lastly, the ministry is also have to plan the population of pigs to meet the demand for that holiday. The Ministry of Industry and Trade is in charge of recover important large markets, traditional markets, open balancing price stores to encourage consumption, arrange examinations, clarify the fee of each stage in market price, examine in equivalent prices between high pig prices and pulp price, control exporting, importing pork, and handle violations if reviewed. The Ministry of Transport is responsible for controlling transporting system to avoid obstruction in shipment. So it's all about my part, the review of the article. So the next part, discussion of parties influence will be delivered by Hoàng Giang, who will help me to continue our presentation.
Okay, thanks for introduction a bit. So let me analyze it about frog market situation. Before government intervention, pig prices have plummeted for reasons such as negative effect of COVID-19, transport circulate goods along with high transportation costs. Supply of fox is available, but the consumption process is low, and diseases in livestock, high price of animal feed. It can be seen that the difficulty directly affect farmers, making them even more difficult. Currently, there's a paradox that farmers only sell very cheap price for pig, but in supermarkets or branded store, customers have to buy them at very high prices. The government has conducted an investigation and has come up with various solutions to make the market price fair for both buyers and sellers. The first two methods are control of products in animal feed, veterinary medicine, and control the traffic system to avoid obstacles in the transport of goods to make it more convenient for business people. The two government intervention both have farmers. In addition, government proposed a plan to restore important large markets, such as traditional markets, to balance prices and increase household consumption. As a result, consumer can buy fruits and other foods at reasonable prices, and farmers also benefit. Large companies are also encouraged to consume the amount of fruit in the country. Therefore, the farm owners have more stable income, while the middleman will be hurt by this intervention. So now we come to the next point, the unintended consequences presented by Du.
So to continue our presentations, I will take in charge the third part of our speech, which is about some unintended consequences when the government intervened to the pork price. So the first consequences I want to mention, it can severe influence on the balance of the market. So with the interventions of the governments, the price can be set at higher price, even higher when the periods when the market was hit by the ASF and the COVID-19 pandemic. So new firms and new competitors will attracted and also enter to the pork market. So mostly labor force will moving from the other areas to work in the pork market and make the efficient scale of the society become imbalanced. Next, the second consequence is about some quality issues of the pork. With a huge amount of suppliers, we create intense competitions between organizations and individuals. And in order to stay and maintain their position in the market, the expenditures must be reduced at the lowest levels. So poor person have to operate the negative measures and ignore the safeties of the consumers. For example, the action of using chemicals by using chemical and additives and apply different techniques to convert food of materials and swelling pork into eye-catching and fresh piece of meat, then sell a competitive price to attract consumers and gain the high profit. And the second action is using unidentified original meat. With purchasing sort of pork without identified origins and very low price compared to common levels, and not compensation thoroughly. For example, like the authorities and the government have combined together to discover more than 6 tons of pork belly and 100% of organ delivery across the border inland with unclear and ambiguous origins and smell foul. And the third consequences I want to talk is about environmental damage. Vietnam, with 70% of the population, currently reside in rural areas. So for that reason, the livestock industry become extremely important factors that develop and enhance the living standard of the citizens. So the pork production rate is rising with overwhelming chemical substances usage uncontrollably. So it can be responsible for the environmental damage in Vietnam. According to some statistical report, the total amount of waste that is charged through the livestock industry in Vietnam, comprising up to 73 million tons of solid waste and 25 to 30 million cubic meter of liquid waste. And 50 of solid and 80 of liquid waste are discharged directly into the environment without any treatment or material removal process. So it causes severe damage to the ecological environments and directly cause the severe health issues of the citizens. So that all of my first three unidentified consequences I want to mention. And the next part will take in charge by Bob.
Okay, thank you too. And the fourth consequence is consumer health. Well, like to have already mentioned in the second consequence that the firms facing intense competition in the pork market. So they will, so if they want to maximize their profit and compete in that in that competitive market, they will have to reduce their expenditure as much as possible by applying measure or cheap measure. Cheap measure normally be negative measure that would threaten the consumer health. On the slide, you can see a picture of the kid after eating contaminated meat. So he has stayed unconscious and have to be in the hospital for 2 weeks before his health fully recover and he can go home. So only in 2015, 9,140 kilograms of salbutamol were imported by enterprises in Vietnam. For those who don't know what is salbutamol, it is a chemical that used to stimulate growth and create leaner and fresher meat color. So the firms, they mix salbutamol with food and feed for the pork, so they could sell it in the higher with a higher price. But salbutamol, when being digested by the human, the digestive system will be affected, and if they consume, if the human being they consume too much salbutamol, that they could cause even death. And also they using sodium metabisulfite to bleach pork meat. Like pork which live for a long time, they will have darker color and could not be sold in a good price. So the firms, they use sodium metabi to bleach it, create a fresher meat color. But the amount of SO2 that contained in sodium metabi will cause stomach and intestinal ulcer and even cancer. So the fourth consequence leading directly to the fifth consequence, which is the demand for pork will fall. So with the health problem caused by intoxicated pork, the consumer, they will have concern and afraid about buying pork because they don't know the pork that they're buying is safe or not. So the consumption of pork meat will drop. And the obvious example is in the first 6 months of 2021, the percentage of output in live pork market, in live beef market had increased 4.2%, and live poultry meat had reached 6.1%. Where the output of live pork market stay unchanged, which means that the consumer have changed their eating habit. The pork has no longer be their first priority. They choose beef or poultry instead. And the final and maybe the worst possible consequence is that market price stay unchanged. Like the policy of government could not affect the market price in the long run, like because there's a lot of participants in the pork market, so they reduce their expenditure and they apply chemical or negative measure, so the consumer won't buy pork anymore, and so that will result in a difficulty for the firm in a market, and they will leave the market. which make the supply chain collapse. And if the market price stay unchanged, the customer will choose alternative option rather than pork meat. So the development of pork industry in Vietnam will be edged off by the other product like pork, like beef, like poultry or seafood. So that is all 6 consequences of the government intervene. The next part is recommendation and conclusion could be delivered to you by Minh Ngọc, please.
Thank you, Val. So the last part of this presentation is recommendations and conclusions. Based on these above discussions, we have come up with a few recommendations that could use to address the problems. It can clearly be seen that the government has put in place a measure to create the most favorable condition for both farmer and consumer. However, some measures are not yet radical, but only temporary in this period. Firstly, it is a good option to require monitoring and checking the cost of each stage to check the price difference. But one thing is for sure, the government cannot intervene and control completely because this is a most complicated stage and has many small stages. Therefore, the phenomenon of price disparity here will still happen. Secondly, the proposed measures are intended to help farmers, but in fact, even with the help of the government, the rancher cannot earn as much profits as they were in the previous time. So in the long run, if this situation continue, a part of farmer will move to other industry. This industry that earns more profits. Similar to farmers, consumers are also subsidized through price balancing shops, but in the long term, they can choose other cheap and quality product instead of pork, such as chicken or fish. On the part of students, it was recommended that the government should have long-term and radical measure, thereby all individuals in the market receive fairness. So we move to their conclusion. The problem that we have mentioned were livestock farmers suffer loss due to their COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, it leads to quantity demands of their consumer falls, price to feed animal rise up, along with shipment and testing price. Government intervened to protect farmers in order to control the price of input, encourage firms to consume domestic pork, address the issue of shipment, and opened balancing price store. But it still leads to unintended consequences, such as the trend of new entrant in the pork market increase, the environment degrades, intense competition in pork markets. Consumer health is threatened, and also the consumer change eating habits. And lastly, the pig price problem may not be solved, even though there were some recommendations. So that is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.